My name's Matt Robertson. I'm a composer and producer from Brighton in the UK, and I've got a pretty unhealthy passion with synthesizers. I got my first synth in about 1991, and I was working in a music store as my weekend job. And somebody brought in an old Roland analog synth, and they wanted to part exchange it for a new Yamaha home keyboard. And that was the first time I'd seen a sort of old analog synth, and I just found it really exciting that you could make sounds that were so immediate and edit them and control them so immediately, which was something that I hadn't really experienced before. It seems like in the last 3, 4, 5 years, people have started to get really interested again in what it actually means to play and perform electronic music, as opposed to just sort of produce it in the studio, which I think are slightly different things. The keyboard controller as an instrument is just a bunch of switches. It's great if you're playing piano samples, but not really much else. So when people started to make MIDI controller keyboards that had all these knobs and sliders and things on them, it seemed like it was moving in the right direction, but there's something very mechanical about that whole side of things, and something very kind of prescriptive about what you can and can't do with them. I always found it really interesting on things like the old VCS3 with the joystick on it. Just having a joystick that you could control several things at the same time with seemed immediately more expressive and responsive to sound creation. And yeah, I just got really interested in sound creation and sort of control of sound. That's what really interested me. One of the things that is really important about electronic music controllers is how they respond to your input. Like an acoustic musical instrument, it responds usually to both being really delicate with it and being quite violent with it, and everywhere in between. It's quite difficult to get that kind of engineering and design into an electronic music controller. So one of the things that really impressed me about it was that it's really, really sensitive, and yet you can control it quite easily as well. So you can use the tiniest of touches to get data out of it, or you can use a really big touch to get data out of it. You can use it for doing really subtle moves, but you can also use it for doing like fast percussive moves, and it seems to respond really well in both cases. Where again, it's a very different thing from triggering the notes on a keyboard and turning the filter knob round. It just feels kind of more immediate because you're changing the filter, but you're doing it as part of the gesture of playing the rhythm, which is a very different thing from having those as sort of separate gestures where you're playing the notes on a keyboard and turning the filter constantly. There don't seem to be any dead zones in it. So you don't get that feeling that you do with a lot of keyboard instruments where you have to sort of press it down a certain way before it does anything at all. It seems really responsive to just like really light touches, but then actually pressing it down a long way too. So I've been using it for a while now. One of the things that I'm really trying to get into the habit of doing, and I'm trying to practice, is having like constant control over the envelope of a sound. And I think that's something that is really difficult to do with using only a keyboard controller. And I've always been really fascinated by the idea of always sort of comparing a synth sound to a violin. And with a violin, the whole action of making the attack of the sound and then the sustain of the sound, it's all within the gesture of playing. So if you want to have a sharp attack or if you want to have a soft, slow attack, it's all within the same gesture. And I think it's really interesting to try and come up with ways to do that with electronic instruments. There's something about the design of it that I respond really well to. I think there's a really good balance of kind of responsiveness and give in it, and the way that the software is designed with it as well. The two sort of work together really well. So you can do some really quick parameter mapping with it, and it just kind of seems to behave how you want it to.